Welcome to MyLife, Chassidus Applied, episode 85. A good Gebench Yar to everyone. I hope this was a transformative and meaningful and inspiring holiday season, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Sukkot, leading to the climax of Simchas Torah, where we go from renewal of Rosh Hashanah to the sanctity of Yom Kippur, to the joy and the growing and elevating joy, Mailim B'Kedish, until we reach the apex on Simchas Torah, and all culminating with Shabbos Bereshis, which was just yesterday. The way we establish ourselves on Shabbos Bereshis, that's how it goes. So we're in a very critical time of the year, where we're in the bridge going from the month of Tishrei to the month of Cheshvan, and this establishes and sets the tone for the entire year. So the achlot is the resolutions we take on in Tishrei, which comes from the word Reishis, same letters Reishis, like Rosh Hashanah and Bereshis, all are like the head of the year, not just the beginning of the year, the central nervous system. So how we resolve and how we determine to behave in the coming year, right now, affects not just a day or two, it affects the entire tone and entire spirit of the year. With that said, I'd like to also begin by addressing the crisis and challenges that our brethren, men, women, and children are facing in Israel and Eretz Yisrael and Eretz HaKadosh. Eretz asher einei Hashem Elokecha ba mereishis Hashanah v'ad achri Shana, as the Pasuk says, and as the Rebbe would quote every time he would refer to it, Hine le'yonim v'le'yishon shem Yisrael, that this is a land that is especially protected by the Eibishter, and yet because of the challenges we have to do our part everywhere in the world to strengthen ourselves and to strengthen our connection to each other. Because there's true response to any crisis. As the Rambam says, we have to look at every situation as one where we act on it. And not to say, I live all the way in a different part of the world, what can I do? I'm one small person. I'm not part of the army, I'm not part of the defense forces, I'm not part of the police. The fact of the matter is, all the nation of Israel, Am Yisrael, is a Kema Acha Shlema, we're one pillar. And when there's a weakness in one element, the other parts of the pillar have to strengthen themselves to strengthen the rest of the body. So the Rebbe gave us many heiras. Unfortunately, this is not the first time there have been such challenges. The Rebbe gave many heiras, whether it began with Mivtzat Film during the time of the 6-Day War, or Mivtzat Mezuzah during the tragedy and the attack in Ma'alot, and the other Mivtzayim that we have, thank God, Torah mitzvahs, and strengthening them, and especially the biggest of all, Avos Yisrael, that when a Jew is attacked somewhere, the best way is to counter it is by connecting even more connection and creating more av and more love, more unconditional love and connection, especially in this year of Hakel, gatherings, as the Rebbe indicated that we should gather together and do something, learn Torah, in the way that brings the Yiras Hashem Elokeichem Kol Yomim Asher Al Pnei Haaretz Al Pnei Ha'adama, that we should be able to, that we should gather together and strengthen in Torah, Aveda, Gemilas Chasodim, the three pillars of studying, of prayer, and of tzedakah, charity, and many other such suggestions. Because time is limited here, I actually wrote up a whole article that went out this past newsletter. If you receive it, if you haven't received it, please send us an email. We'll be happy to sign you up and send it to you. It's on our website, meaningfullife.com, a collection of all the different suggestions and directives the Rebbe gave in times of challenge in Eretz Yisrael. Bottom line is, as we learn in Parshas Bereshis, Lefikach nivra Adam yechidi. Why was Adam created as an individual? To teach us that each of us is chayev Adam, every person is responsible to say the whole world was created for me. Which means, despite the fact there are 7 billion people on this earth, despite that there are many others, we each have to feel the responsibility for the situation in Eretz Yisrael and strengthen beruchnis and begashmis, everything possible in the fortitude and reinforce our spiritual connection as well as our physical connection, and that in turn strengthens Klal Yisrael wherever they may be, especially the Eden in Eretz Yisrael. And now, of course, beginning of the year, as I just mentioned, what better time when we set the tone for the entire year in all these positive ways. So our response to negative is always with strengthening the positive strings that keep us together and that have shaped and defined this eternal nation, Am Yisrael, till this very day. In that spirit, let us continue what has become a custom here to discuss the timeliness of the period we are in now. As I said, we're at the end of the month of Tishrei, literally going into Cheshvan the next few days. and this week is the Parshas Noach. And of course, the expression that the Rabbeim used during this period of time, and the Rebbe emphasized every year, would be V'Yakov holach l'darkei, taken from the pasuk in the end of Parshas Vayetze, after Yaakov leaves 20 years of his travails and difficulties by Lavan. V'Yakov holach l'darkei, Yaakov went on his way. Here, actually, it's coming from Tishrei, a merubah b'moedes, Chedesh HaShvi, a month filled with holidays. And Shvi, Muzba Bakel, meaning it's sated and satiated with all the different powers and energies of Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur and Sukkot, all the way to Simchas Shmini Atzeres and Simchas Teda, that now Yaakov holach l'darkei, each of us goes back to so-called our regular routines. But the challenge is, how do you infuse this regular routine with a new inspiration, the new Er Chodesh, the new energy that entered into this world with Rosh Hashanah? That's the difficult challenge. Another expression of Yaakov holach l'darkei is also, the Rebbe brings from the Frierdiker Rebbe, an expression of Hanander packen the peklach. Now is the time to unpack the luggage, to unpack that which we gathered together throughout this Yom Tov. There's a tzedel from the Rebbe that has been going around, maybe you've seen it, if not, I'll read it to you. The Rebbe says, B'teichin kosmei, about what you're writing, you should speak and request your mashpia. That he should explain to you the Pizgim Nisiyenu, the expression from the Rabbeim, that la'achrei Tishrei tzarech fanander paken es ha'chavila shekiblu b'Tishrei v'chulu. That after Tishrei you have to fanander paken, unpack the chavila, the packages that we gathered and we collected, that we received in Tishrei. So we have a particular mission given to us. It's not just the holidays are over. By Yiddishkeit, everything is nitzchi and everything lives on. It's about sustaining it and maintaining this energy in our regular lives, that they should not be regular, making the ordinary extraordinary. So it's of course also apropos, therefore, that we come right from Bereshis into Noach. After creation, a new world, what happens? The world gets corrupt, and then comes a mabul. Chassidus explains, Mayim Rabim, Layuchel Lichvis es ha'ava, Mayim Rabim goes on Daigas ha'parnasa. The anxieties of life, all life. Parnasa, of course, is a central component. The livelihood, where will the money come from? The worries that we have about paying our bills. But it refers to the general worries of life. And they're like a Mayim Rabim, they're like a deluge, a flood that can overwhelm us. Which is exactly the challenge as we come from Tishrei, when we were protected in the oasis and in the bubble, so to speak, the spiritual bubble of such holidays, we're lifted on their wings. Now that we're settling down and going back to our own lives, both physically and spiritually, here we're suddenly overwhelmed, and we can be overwhelmed by the raging floodwaters. And what's the Eitzah? Aseh lecha teva. The Eibishter tells Noach, build a teva, and the Baal Shem Tov teaches teva. You could have said for the word boat, for the ark, there are many words in Hebrew. There's svina, there's aniyah, there's teva. So he says teva also means the word. In Hebrew, eis is a letter, teva is a word. Build for yourself words, the holy words of Torah and Tefillah, and they will serve as an ark that will protect you from the overwhelming floodwaters. A very direct, a simple directive. That as the floodwaters begin to affect us, the way you do it is you surround yourself, you buffer yourself with the asis of Torah and Tefillah, tevas of Torah and Tefillah, the teva, and that not only protects you, but you actually ride on those waves. So the waves actually become a support, a springboard for your growth. And then there comes a time when we leave the teva and we have to go out to the world and bring the experience of the Torah and Tefillah into our daily lives. The bottom line is, we are spiritual creatures and souls that were sent to this earth. It's the foundation of Chassidish teachings for a mission. And we have to always remember that the mission is not the parnasa, it's not the livelihood, it's not the other travails and challenges we have in life. The mission is to transform this world. The world can be very overwhelming. Tishrei Cheshvan transition, where we are now, captures it in the sense of time, this transition. The transition from a more spiritual state to a more material state. But the goal of it is that we have to reinforce and strengthen the teva that we build, that helps us deal with and counter and protect us from all the forces that can seduce and overwhelm us in its tentacles. So it's a very direct Torah, and we do it through Torah and Tefillah by being keveya. The Rabbeim would always take upon themselves a new minig, a new hidur for the new year, to take upon yourself, in addition to what we're doing regularly in the routine, to add additional learning or additional prayer. Same thing with the Milas Chasadim. And this teva, these words, become a force that help us counter all the other factors that can sometimes overwhelm us. The Rebbe in the Sichos, especially in Tovshin Lamed Ches, after the heart attack, so the Rebbe spoke from his room, as you may know, Mitzvah Simchas Torah, the Mitzvah Bereshis, Mitzvah Noach, and then especially the Rebbe focused on the V'Yakov Holach L'Darkei in all its stages. V'Yakov Holach L'Darkei really begins, he says there, even on Sukkot. Then he has a V'Yakov Holach L'Darkei from after the holidays into the last days of Tishrei. Then there's a V'Yakov Holach L'Darkei into the month of Cheshvan, a V'Yakov Holach L'Darkei from Bereshis to Noach. So it's a whole series of V'Yakov Holach L'Darkei as we climb and then we descend and draw these forces back into our lives. So it's good sichos to read. There's a lot of material there. That Tovshin Lamed Ches, of course, in later years is equal material, but that's a place you could look in the Esophagus of Likutei Sichos, Chelik Chaf, volume 20, are all the sichos that the Rebbe edited from his room with those sichos that he spoke. So it has a particular chavivus, a particular special quality due to the situation that the Rebbe was in then, and seeing that the vibrancy and the strength that came out even of seemingly a setback. Okay, now, with that, we will address now and go over to some topics. We've had somewhat of a break here because of the holidays. So MyLife, Chassidus Applied continues where we left off. Many questions have come over the Yom Tevim, even though, as I said, we didn't have these broadcasts, but the questions didn't stop coming in about all kinds of topics, the controversial ones, the so-called taboo ones, and ones that are more that sometimes more conventional, if you call it that. So we will continue in addressing questions, and of course, as well, a Chassidus question for the week, which has become a feature as well in these episodes. And finally, the essay contest that we had last year, Chavdal Tevis, and Mitzvah Shem will also be this year. In that same time period, you'll hear more about that. And so let's just jump right into it. We also have some feedback and follow-up, but let me begin with a new question. What defines a Chassidish person? How, if at all, is Chassidish different than Frum? And this breaks down to several questions that we received, which I shall read for you right now. Especially around the area of Shidduchim. So, and then I'll address the entire package of questions together. Dear Rabbi Jacobson, can you please clarify what is considered Chassidish for a potential wife? For example, can a Chassidish girl like to shop, wear nail polish, makeup, and make an effort to look good, nice, and dress up? Does she need to like to farbreng? What's okay and what is a no-no in a Chassidish girl? And for that matter, what are the guidelines for males? Okay. One question. Another question. Hi, Rabbi Simon Jacobson. Thank you so much for your Chassidus Applied classes. They're very enlightening and practical. Question. What is the appropriate dress code for a Chabad Chassid? Is how we dress important, or is that just superficial? Okay. So even though there's more details here than just what's Chassidish, let's begin with the most important thing when it comes to all these questions. I don't have any brilliant answers for these questions except only one place to go to. Who defines what's Chassidus is the Rabbeim and the Rabbeim alone. Not myself, not you, not Rabbonim, not anyone. Chassidus was founded by the Baal Shem Tov and then the Alter Rebbe Chassidus Chabad. Obviously, it's a Gili Alakus that they, as leaders, were revealing what was told to them to reveal. And they taught us the standards of what means Chassidishkeit. The fact that different cultures or communities embrace and adopt different standards, or each one in their own way, that's their business. If it's based on the Sichos and Maimorim and the directives of the Rabbeim, then that's what's called Chassidus. When people ask the Rebbe, what says to Iskashas, Chassidishkeit, it means to connect to the Rebbe's Torah and to the Rebbe's directives. So that's the first definition of Chassidus, that your head and your heart is in the right place, your priorities in the right place. What are the priorities? To be dedicated to the mission that the Eibishter sent you, your neshama, down to this earth, to be dedicated to the mission that the Eibishter gave his shluchim, the Rabbeim, the Rebbe in our generation, that he sent them to teach us what is the particular mission of each period in time, and dedicating yourself to that, both in the learning of it, understanding it, and acting on it, and practicing it, is the bottom line of Chassidish. So when you're looking for a shidduch, the first and foremost thing is the foundational elements. Of course, there are variations. People have different personalities. People have different strengths and their weaknesses. But it's critical to cut to the chase and push away the things that are peripheral, that are secondary. The priority is, the primary element is, Chassidish is bound that your life is dedicated to the Rebbe's inyanim. The Rebbe's inyanim means the Rebbe's Torah and the Rebbe's directives. And that you live your life by that. Does not mean you're a perfect person. It means that's what you strive for. And you're not distracted, and you didn't get hijacked by other agendas, which is so easy to do. As I said, the Mayim Rabim, that draws people in all different directions. The details you talk about, whether it's nail polish or makeup or other things, look, different people have different choices. If it's something al pitera that's eis gehalten, then people can do it. If it's not al pitera, if it's osir, obviously it's osir. So it's a halacha question, which of course this is not the platform for halacha questions. But how exactly a person shops, or wears nail polish, or where they travel to, or what clothing they choose to buy, is not the basis of Chassidishkeit. It's as tofel shebetofel as it gets. Obviously, there's a Torah that teaches us the laws of tznius and the laws of modesty. There's halachas for it. But besides that, there's also the whole spirit, Chassidishkeit, which is the question. You're not asking me about frumkeit. Chassidishkeit is the connection to the Rebbe's kavanah, the Eibishter's kavanah as given to us and directed to us through the Rebbe. So that's the foundation of the whole thing, Chassidishkeit. So the question about Chassidish and Frum, yes, you do it that there were Chassidim that were more Chassidish than Frum, with like the famous story that Rebbe tells from one of the Chassidim who said, Mele asher volatzin, aber chitas aber chalen gehet from Rebbe. Now obviously this should not be interpreted the wrong way. What that means is, not asher volatzin chaz v'sholem is optional. It means there's a special chvivus, a special quality. So you cherish something you heard directly from your Rebbe. And the Rebbe brings dugmayos from it, with the hadassim of the Rab Tarfon, etc., etc. But the point of the matter is that there is an element of that. But remember, Chassidus is not a stira, God forbid, to Torah. Chassidus is Torah. Chassidus is frumkeit. The question is, if you're more religious than God, or you're more focused on yourself, or you're focused, what Chassidus adds is the bittul to something higher than yourself. There are people that are very frum, but it's about themselves. But Chassidus adds, it's not about you, it's about the cause. It's about the Rebbe, it's about the Eibishter's kavanah. So there is that discussion about frumkeit and Chassidus in that sense. But let's be honest, anyone that understands Chassidus well, Chassidus is ogiboit and totally about Torah and halacha and a digdu kal shel divrei sofrim. The fact that some people may embrace something because their Rebbe said it with a little more passion than something they just read in Shulchan Aruch, that can be understood, but never chas v'sholem in a way that compromises or weakens the connection. If the Rebbe does anything, Chassidus does anything, it makes you a fruminated and a more connected one to God's intentions. But you could have frumkeit without a God. So Chassidus reminds us that there's an Eibishter of the Welt, and that there's a kavanah, and it's not just your particular hidur that is the ikir here. It's not about you. It's about the higher purpose. That's the contribution. So some people may have the higher purpose and they don't have every digdu kal figured out. Some people have every digdu kal, but they don't have the higher purpose. The goal is to have both of them. And that's really, at the end of the day, what Chassidus comes to add, as the Frierdiker Rebbe once told a group of Rabbonim, of German rabbis, when they asked him, what did Chassidus come to add? Here we're a Frum community over 1,000 years old without Chassidus. And he gave the example of a beam. They were in a hotel lobby of the pillars there, the marble pillars. What do they see when you look at them? They say, we see beautiful marble pillars. When you get closer, he shined a light on them. The Frierdiker Rebbe said, now what do you see? They say that we see the exquisite flowers and other images engraved in the marble. Why didn't you say that earlier? Because from a distance you don't see it. He said, that's Chassidus. Didn't come to add anything new. Came to illuminate the flowers of what is Torah and what is Yiddishkeit. Avis Yisrael, Simcha. You say this, that the foundations of the Baal Shem Tov's Torah are not new concept. Avis Yisrael is the Yisayid of Kol HaTorah Kula, Klal Gadol B'Torah. Zui Kol HaTorah Kula. Same thing with Simcha. Yet Chassidus emphasized the neshama and brought it out when sometimes you can lose sight of it and become a mechanical Jew, and you can lose sight of the spirit and soul and just do things in a very stale and stagnant fashion. As far as the question about dress, what is the appropriate dress code for a Chabad Chassid? Again, we have directives from the Rabbeim, from the Rebbe, the Rabbonim of the Rabbeim, that the Rebbe gave the Rabbonim certain guidelines, both for men and for women. And that's what we have to follow. Here's not the place to go into these guidelines. I would defer you to a Rav, a Chassidish Rav, and ask him the question. There's the things that are required. There are things that are optional. But the Chabad Chassid looks like a Chassid, obviously, and follows the guidelines because the Rebbe wore certain garments, a hat, white shirt, and black clothing. Doesn't mean you have to exactly follow that, but it means that became a standard. But more details, I think every person should speak to their mashpia, their rav, because there's no one way, one size fits all. Not everybody has to be dressed exactly the same way. There is variations involved, and so on. And that's my response to that. In general, yes, dress alone is a superficial thing, but your dress reflects who you are. And it's a uniform. You see, lahavdil in baseball or in the army, they don't say dress is superficial. It reflects of what you represent. So on its own, of course, it's only a garment. What is it? What's the point of dressing a certain way if your soul and neshama is not there? Obviously. But part of your neshama is to be one that shines out, not just on the inside, but also on the outside, that it reflects the dignity and the way you carry yourself. Your composure is expressed also in how you dress with class and how you walk and how you talk, as the Rambam says. It's part of an expression. So obviously on its own, it's empty, but it's reflective of the inner pneumius of a person. Then, of course, it has significance in that sense. Okay. Next question. A little more controversial. This, I would say, is viewer discretion advised. A little more adult material. Pre-marital relations, which is really addressing the premarital challenges facing young men and women today. Why are premarital relations prohibited? What is the best way to build a wholesome life and create a healthy and lasting relationship, home, and family? When dating seriously, some individuals try to cover up their past inappropriate relations. How should this be dealt with? What can practically be done to change the loose attitude some have to premarital intimacy? How should this issue be addressed in a civil and productive fashion? How do we infuse our children with the proper values and standards regarding sexuality? In this vein, another questioner asks, hello, Rabbi Jacobson. I haven't previously been a fan of yours. However, this series has turned me. I enjoy these tremendously. If nothing else, it's the best Chassidishe I've ever attended. Although it's plenty more, as every question you answer has significance somewhere in my life. So thank you. Are premarital relations actually against halacha, or is it a chumrah and technically, in the certain conditions, should be okay? Question. More importantly, what is the significance of not having premarital relations? Another questioner asks, if we don't talk about it, it doesn't mean it's not happening. It seems to me and others that there's a growing trend of Frum people having relations before marriage. Often individuals try to cover it up, but that does not change the fact. Why is this happening? And where are our values and priorities regarding this? Another question. Intimacy for older singles. Being an older single, at times I can have strong desires, urges for intimacy, which can in a way be emotional torture, and has the ability of leading to Chatas Noach. Is this okay? And how do we, especially growing up from people that do not have a way of dealing with these kinds of needs outside of marriage, how should we deal with it? Okay. So firstly, some of these questions I've already addressed in earlier episodes, especially in the beginning. But since obviously this is a pressing issue to many, so let's speak about it. When I wrote the book Toward a Meaningful Life, so there's a chapter, of course, on intimacy and a chapter on marriage and love, and I advise everyone to read that because there I captured, as best of my ability, the Rebbe's views on it. So I had to look through all the sichos in Maimorim, and you don't have much that the Rebbe speaks directly about this for obvious reasons. Because part of the way Torah Chassidus looks at these matters is to speak also in a tznius way. So it's not just acting tznius, it's speaking about tznius in a tznius way. There's some people that talk about tznius in non-tznius ways, which of course undermines the whole purpose. So there's discretion and sensitivity and subtlety required, and I'll try to do that as well as I address this here. But as looking for the sichos, I was looking for different elements. So I referred to one sicha, Yutes Kislev, Tovshin Lamed Aleph. So the Rebbe is speaking, I think is the fifth sicha. The Rebbe is speaking there about a convention where a young woman got up and started speaking about the virtues of premarital relations in front of Rabbonim, in front of Frum. So you can read the sicha on your own. It's one of the places where the Rebbe addresses it, somewhat, you can say, tangentially. But he talks about it, and you see there clearly he does not see it as a light matter. And so I'm taking the Rebbe's cue, and I'm not going down to the halacha of this ask again Rav, but there clearly the Rebbe refers to the real Isur, and also says briefly, which I developed in Torah Meaningful Life, the reason for it. It's not just Exeris HaKosov. So there's more than just halacha here and comfort zones. It's where our lives are at. What's the center of our lives? So I want to address it the way Chassidus addresses it from the root. Obviously, we'll soon talk about nisyonos and tests and people have challenges. Why did your soul come down to this earth? It came down to fulfill a purpose. To find your soulmate, to find that soulmate and build a home and family. This is the central purpose, and build a home and family and make a dira b'tachtenim in the part of your world. Just like Odem Achavel Lovda L'Shamra, to serve and protect in Gan Eden. Bosel Legani Achesikala, the first mimer of the Rebbe. Make a gan, a garden out of this world that can be often a jungle. And you do that by building a home and family. Sheves Yitzara, the first foundation is building a home and a family. So it's not a side job. It's the center of our activities. Ein odem b'loi bayis, ein odem b'loi isha. Chassidus explains because the Eibush is that way. Ein odem b'loi bayis because l'mayla nisava kadosh baruch hu liyis le'dira b'tachtenim. God wanted to have a home, desired a home. That's why we need a home. And b'loi isha, God wanted a partner who's the isha, Knesset Yisrael. There's kavyachol, so to speak, a marriage between the divine and the human being. And that's why there's marriage in the physical world. So that's central to the whole relationship and reflective as a microcosm of the whole purpose of existence. So to then somewhat desecrate or compromise that relationship through premarital relations is not just a small matter, okay, this Aveda, that Aveda. It's undermining the whole kavanah of the Bria, the whole purpose of creation. Now, a person made a mistake, there's ways to do tshuva. We're not talking about that. You're talking about the concept. It's not about, because life is not about your pleasure. It's not about your needs. It's not even about your sexual needs. So that's the first thing that has to be established. Where's your head at? People who start looking for heterim and loopholes and permissible ways, that maybe they'll find some type of heter for certain things. I'm not suggesting that at all. I'm just saying even if you do, but what's missing, the biggest thing is, why are you even looking for a heter? Why aren't you living your life the way God intended you to live life? Find yourself a spouse, a man find a woman find a man, build a beautiful life, have a great sexual and intimate life as Torah prescribes. Torah rejects celibacy and says that it has to be with pleasure and it has to be in ways that spouses satisfy each other. Adrab of adrab. So when someone comes and asks that question, it's not being judgmental, but we cannot ignore that there's more than just the details of the question. It's the whole foundation of the attitude and perspective. Now, someone will say, one second, what's that? What do I do if I don't have that perspective? Okay, so we got to talk about it. And maybe that's part of the reason there are the problems we're having. There's symptoms. There's symptoms of people lacking focus, just like some people commit their entire lives to money. There are people who commit their entire lives to sexuality, and some to both together. That's common. That's the way of all flesh. Torah and Chassidus came to change that and say it doesn't work that way. We're here to sanctify our lives. So any type of intimacy outside of that sacred institution is a compromise of the purpose of existence itself. That's one point. Second point, when you look in the Sikh in Lamed Aleph, Yutes Kislev, is the idea that the fact is that sexuality is an extremely powerful force. That's why it has such a hold on us. And that's why it's such a nisayon and a test. So when a person in any way experiences it outside of commitment of marriage, in a way they take away part of that purity. They've somewhat defiled that purity. It's like, think of sexuality and intimacy, the proper holy sacred way, as going into the Holy of Holies. Once a year we go Yom Kippur in the Holy of Holies. And someone will say, I want to have a taste of that before Yom Kippur. I want to have a taste of it before I do it in the full sense of the word. You're basically going to the Holy of Holies when you've not yet earned your way in. So somewhat, once you have a premarital experience, you take away from the purity of actually entering the Holy of Holies. Now, of course, I know the next question will be, what about so many people who've had it, either such relations because they didn't know better, they were not yet committed, or they didn't know about what the commitment is. Remember, the Eibishter judges people based on where they are at. Person who didn't know better, there's ways of doing tshuva, there's ways of building a life, a pure life. We're talking here to people who are asking the question before the fact, not after the fact. So I want to make it clear, I'm not talking about after the fact now. I'm not talking about after the fact and then saying, you know what, because after the fact, so and so, that's why I can permit myself to do certain things. That's not the discussion here. Let's just put that into context. The discussion here is how to live the best possible life. And this cuts back to the issue of our children as well. We must teach our children not just what holy intimacy is. We have to teach them the purpose of existence. Why is there intimacy in the first place? It's in order to create a model on earth of love and intimacy that we have with God. That's what human beings are here for. So when we build a home and family in a sacred way, and the intimacy is taras hamishpacha, that's a model of how our lives are lived. And this is something you can convey even to young children without any explicit language. It's a spirit. It's a spirit of a healthiest home, a pure, healthy environment that doesn't have other agendas, that doesn't have other side shows going on, which also addresses another issue. Some people say, and it's not really a direct question, what's wrong if I do something outside of the marriage, etc., etc.? Even if you find yourself some loophole, and again, I'm not giving loopholes, I'm just suggesting even, you're undermining the whole fabric of the sanctity of a home. This is our commitment. This is our commitment. Now, we all make mistakes, and we learn from our mistakes. That's not what we're addressing now. Now, of course, the question comes, what about older singles that have this nisayon? So what should I tell you? My answer is, get married as soon as possible. That's the bottom line. There's no other answer from the Torah. You say, well, I haven't gotten married yet, or I have challenges or difficulties. That's exactly the reason. So what are we going to do? Change the laws because people are choosing to get married later, or choosing to build their careers, or become so involved in external matters that they're not focusing on what matters? And I'm not, God forbid, I'm not judging. I am not in any way trying to criticize anyone that's in that situation. I empathize. I know people who've tried and they, for whatever reason, are not married yet. I don't have an answer for you. But I definitely, as one, cannot go ahead and sanction and say, okay, if that's the case, speak to your mashpia, speak to your individual Rav, and try to work it out. I don't think there's something that could be said in a global fashion here that would be legitimate. To say, okay, once you reach 28, or once you reach 26, this is allowed. That would not be allowed to a 22-year-old. I don't think that's the way to go here. But I think that speaking to a sensitive and Chassidish mashpia who understands the situation, absolutely we believe that that there's any situation we have the abilities to deal with the situation. So I'm convinced that if a person is going with a sincere and approach with integrity, they will find an answer that will be doable, actionable. I'm not talking about a theory living like a monk or living like a person who's a malach, an angel, figuring out a way and addressing this properly with the right mashpia and so on and so forth. But above all, of course, marriage is not optional. It is necessary in post the kavanas abriya, the kavanah of your life, and to maintain the standard of what the Kodesh Kodashim is meant to be. So this is a general response to the topic. As far as trends go, I am not here to go define trends. I don't know what's going on out there. No one knows the real numbers. I will just say like this, that if we lose our priorities in this context of everything I've said, obviously people are going to become more loose and lenient with the fundamentals of Yiddishkeit in general and their own lives and their own intimacy. That's an obvious thing. That's why the goal here is to strengthen that focus. And the younger age you do it, the more possible reinforcement or arsenal do we have, more weapons in our arsenal to preempt any of these challenges. The Eibusher should bless everyone out there, singles, to find their soulmates, especially coming from Bereshis, Zocher Nekeva Boreisam, and build healthy homes. And that may be the best achlota of all to make as we enter this new year. Okay. Next question. Do non-Jews have a soul? The diversity is very interesting. I have been taught from Tanya, he's referring to chapter 2, end of chapter 1, chapter 2, Nefesh Hashenis B'Yisrael, that only Jews have a divine soul. Non-Jews do not. I'm uncomfortable with his teaching. I want to know if this is truly what the Alter Rebbe himself taught. And how is this consistent with the fact that the Torah says that all humans originating from Adam were created in the divine image, and that we have an obligation to influence them, the non-Jews that is, to keep the Noahide laws given by God at Sinai. Question 2, which is an extension of obviously this topic. What does it mean in Perek Aleph of Tanya when it says Chesed le'umim chatos? Aren't all people equal? Are there no generally kind non-Jews? What of all those righteous Gentiles who saved thousands of lives in the Holocaust? Okay. So, there was a Chassidus with college students in Tov Shin Chof, 1960. Dr. Block from London, Ontario, Yitzchok Block, brought these students. They asked questions to the Rebbe, and the Rebbe responded. It was then written down, and later was discovered by myself an edited version, which we actually published for my son's bar mitzvah. So it's an edited version. One of the questions, close to the end, was that they heard from Dr. Block that Jews, non-Jews, do not have divine souls. Is this true? Now, this is not included in the Rishima, in the transcript of the Rebbe's words, but Dr. Block confirmed it to me because I asked him. He said the Rebbe responded. You'll see in the published version it just says the Rebbe answered. The Rebbe responded, tell Dr. Block, who, mind you, was standing there in the room with them, that he's wrong. They don't have a Jewish spark or soul. They don't have a Jewish soul, but they have their own divine spark. So in the Hanoche that's printed with edits, it doesn't say, tell Dr. Block he was wrong. It just says that they don't have a Jewish one, they have another spark. Which the truth is a Gemara and a Teisvis in Masechta Yevomis. And I refer you to page 230 in volume 13 of Likutei Sichos. The Rebbe has a whole series of footnotes there explaining the Rambam at the end of Shemitah V'Yevel, where he talks about the different elements of non-Jews and makes it very, very clear that Kol Ish V'Isha Shenod V'Libei, that can be Kedesh Kedoshim, Holy of Holies, is referring also to non-Jews. Quotes the Teisvis that speaks about Eitzer, Shenikra Guf, that there's an Eitzer of Neshamis, like a collection of where Neshamis reside, and there's a particular one for non-Jews. As the Rambam paskins, Chsidu Meselim Yeshlem Chelik Le'elam Haba. Righteous Gentiles have a place in the world to come. What is that if not a soul? And of course, especially when you read the end of the Rambam, that Mashiach's times is indicated by what? By Lo Yeh Eisa Kol Ha'elam El L'Dasas Hashem B'Lvad. That the entire world will be preoccupied only with knowing God. And it's very clear he's talking about non-Jews, because then he says, and Yisrael will be Chachamim V'Neveinu as he goes on. Citing, of course, the pasuk in Yeshaya, Kimola Orez Deis Hashem Kamayim Layom Echas. A world filled with divine knowledge as the waters cover the sea. And since we're at the threshold of the Geula, as the Rebbe makes clear, and we have 7 billion people on earth, and only 14 million of them are Jews, so what happens with the rest of them? They're close to 7 billion. They're going to be, they are the threshold of knowing God. What knows God? Someone without a soul. So of course then you'll ask the question, so what is he talking in Tanya? And Tanya is talking about a particular Nefesh Hashenis B'Yisrael, a Nefesh Elikis that's unique to Jews, and that's not a contradiction. The truth is everything in existence has a soul. There's something on earth that cannot have a spirit. The Arizal says there's a nefesh ha-daimemes, there's a nefesh ha-tzemeches, there's a nefesh ha-chaya. Even a daimim, a mineral, an inanimate mineral has a spirit, a soul, a nefesh. So Allah is a human being, created, as the questioner points out, b'tselem elikim, in the divine image. Chaviv adam shenivra b'tselem. Every human being on earth was created in the divine image, unlike an animal. And a divine image is a spirit, a soul. Ruach ha'behem yeredes lamata. Everyone has the animal spirit which descends below, but there's Ruach ha'adam el lamayla, which is referring again to all human beings. And you see this practically. Every person on earth has transcendent aspirations. It's not just about survival. So then you'll say, 1 second, so what do we, all these things about goyim? So let me suggest the following. There's goyishkeit and there's goyim. You can have a goy that's goyishkeit, a pagan, whose complete life is focused on avodah zarah and self-preservation and self-glorification, lasses le'shem, as we learned in the end of Parshas Noach, when the dead have afloga, when they build the tower, then that's goyishkeit, yeshus. So goyishkeit, yeshus, that's the war of Torah against yeshus. But if a goy refines himself, as the Rebbe brings in those footnotes in Likutei Sichos, volume 13, as I pointed out, from the Alter Rebbe, that there were non-Jews who became scholars, who separated themselves from material pursuits, who refined themselves in the highest levels, as possible. They are, as the Gemara says, k'kohen gadol. Akum she'osik b'teira is like a kohen gadol shenichnas lefnei lefnim. He's like the kohen gadol that enters the Holy of Holies. A Jew, it says, is even higher than that. How could you say that? So he says, b'sheva mitzvahs didhu, Rashi says, in the rules and laws that are applied to him. But he's like a kohen gadol, like the Rebbe brings there. Ish v'ish, he's not v'ruchei. If he committed his life to the divine, he becomes like Kodesh Kadoshim, Holy of Holies. Chasidu Meselim, Yeshlam Chelik Leilam Haba, L'dases Hashem Bulvat. So there's goyishkeit and there's a goy. We say there's a goy asher bekirbecha. What does that mean? The Alter Rebbe said it. The Alter Rebbe in the story with Shmuel Munkes, where he came the first time to see the Alter Rebbe, was at night. Shmuel Munkes seemed to always come at night to the Alter Rebbe. He saw one light shining in Liozne, and he realized there must be the Alter Rebbe's house. So he knocked on the door. It's very late or very early. And the Alter Rebbe comes to the door. He sees a stranger. What can I do for you? He's looking for the Reb Shneir Zalman, or however he addressed him. The Alter Rebbe didn't know who he was. He says, come back in the morning. It's not in the middle of the night. And the Alter Rebbe was closing the door on him. He put his foot in the door. And the Alter Rebbe said, if you don't leave, I'm going to call the goy to throw you out. So Rav Shmuel Munkes said to the Alter Rebbe, mein goy Rebbe is gresser starker for dein goy. My goy is stronger than your goy. And the Rebbe brings Na'or, it's at the end of Sefer Tilim, El Yetzev Yitzchok, that goy asher bekirbecha. So there's the concept of goyishkeit, which is yeshus and klipa, which is the key focus really at the end of chapter 1. Now there was a time and period in history where goyim were in that state. Maybe the majority even. For sure the majority. But there's a point where they become more refined. And they have the ability to become Chassidu Meselim. And as the Rebbe brings again that in those footnotes in Chelik Yud Gimel 13, chapter 13, from the name of the Alter Rebbe, the Haril Palisher writes, that Chassidu Meselim is from Nega. They're not from Shalosh Klippos Atmeyas. So it's another discussion. So what is Tanya referring to then? For as far as Chesed Lu'umim Chatas, let me just say the following few points, and I'm sure there'll be questions on this and more discussion. Chesed Lu'umim Chatas basically says there that they don't do any good for any it's always with an ulterior motive. So let me ask a klotz kasha. And Eden do things for selflessly. The Rambam, the Halach, in the Gemara says in Kedushin, the Rambam paskins le'elim yasig adam b'teir mitzvah shalei l'shma. Shemetech shalei l'shma bol l'shma. And Hilchos Tshuva, the Rambam says that only Avraham Avinu eses emes mipnei shu emes. He was the only one that did it because of the thing itself. He did truth because it's true. Everyone else, it's either through schar gash, because of material reward or a spiritual reward. So the Alter Rebbe is saying that they chesed lu'umim chatas. Everyone's chesed is for some ulterior motive, at least initially. So of course some answer that it's true, but a Jew can reach a place that's selfless. But that requires an aved, the gedela. And secondly, what's the big thing if you do something Shalei Lishma? So you do it. Shalei Lishma, Mitech Shalei Lishma, Bo Lishma. So it's more complicated than just dismissing the way we learn Pshat and dismissing Shalosh Klipsat Meis, Embem Tev Klal, that Al Tzemach Tzedek adds Mitzad Atzmam, Ki Diuk, Embem Tev Klal Mitzad Atzmam, because it's like Nechshach Chaticha Nasan Nevela, as brought in Maimorim of the Rebbe Rashab. Because when a person's Goyishkeit, which is Avodah Zarah, which is complete self-focus, Apare, and Amalek, and so on, which was the part of history which says, Lo yitiyeh k'maisa knani, so many psukim and so many mitzvahs in the Torah, not to be maisa knani, which was paganism, that's very much captured there. But then a goy can become a chassid l'meselam, and that's a whole different discussion. This still doesn't make him a Jew, there's still atav v'chatanu, and there's the Havdalah ben Yisrael la'amim, two different focuses. Being that this is a broader topic, I don't want to continue more, I'll just throw out a few more sikhs. Noach, in Chelik Tezvov, the Rebbe speaks about akum sheshavas, the difference why a goy is not supposed to keep Shabbos and a Jew, yes. Look at that, that's number one. Another sikh about ribas, why you're not allowed to take ribas ma'achicha from a Jew, but it's a mitzvah to take ribas, which is interest, from a non-Jew. There's a beautiful sikh on that, and I commit to talking about this more in coming episodes, but because I want to focus on some other things as well, I'm going to pause here, I'm going to stop here for this episode. So I hope I answered the question to some extent. Okay. Trusting others in Hashem. How to be more honest and trusting of others. How to stop lying. I find myself being dishonest with others. When I started lying, it was originally to protect myself. Without going into the details, I would get out of negative situations by lying my way out of them. Now that I'm older, I catch myself lying and get upset about it. I'd like to break this habit, which has by now become second nature. I now understand that I lie because of my lack of trust in others. My dishonesty has crossed over now into my davening, in the sense that since I lack trust in people, I also lack trust in Hashem. So, Rabbi Jacobs, how can I, A, be more honest, and B, be more trusting? Thank you for any suggestions you may have. Thank you for this very blunt assessment of yourself. Not everybody admits to these type of dishonesty. So, Yedias Hamach L'Chetzi Refuah, knowing a problem is half its cure. And it's absolutely true. Emes, when you say Hashem Elokim Emes, Hashem Elokeichem Emes, as Hashem is Emes, as he speaks about in Tanya as well, Emes is let's call it seamlessness. It's the letters Aleph, Mem, Sof, the first, the last, and the middle of the Hebrew alphabet. Why? Because Emes means it's Emes throughout. A truth that's only true in one part and not true in another is not true at all. So letter Aleph, letter Sof, and letter Mem. The B'riach Hatichin, the middle rod that goes Ma'avriach min HaKotze la Kotze. Sheker, on the other hand, is the three letters Shin Kuf Reish, the three next to last letters in the Hebrew alphabet. They're right bunched together as opposed to Aleph Mem Sof. Why? Because Sheker ein lo raglayim. Deception and lies don't have anything to stand on, so they hang out with each other. Every lie needs a friend. Every lie needs to bring another lie to protect that lie, to the point you don't even know anymore what's a lie, what's not a lie. So these are the contrast of life. We live in Alma de Shikra, a world that's deceptive. Very easy to lie to yourself and to others. Emes is revealing a lakus in this world. We all have within us a neshama, a soul, pure soul. If we were in touch with it, we wouldn't have to lie because we'd be completely secure and confident with who you really are. We lie because we get caught up in the delusion that we haven't figured out, or whatever it is that in the world is taking place now, that I have to please somebody, I have to find favor, and all the other things, especially when we grew up in homes which are dysfunctional. We were forced to lie, either because we were ashamed of what's going on or because our parents lied and so on. So it creates a dissonance, a dichotomy, an inconsistency, echad b'peh, echad b'lev, which so many people have. That duplicity is the word I should have used. Duplicity. So that's identifying the problem. The problem is it's a pirud. A lie is a pirud, a separation between you and yourself, between you and your own truth, between you and God. So the way to deal with it is firstly to understand that it's not a small matter. It's really going into the whole issue. Are you bringing emes and alakus into this world? Are you bringing the truth of yourself into this world? Or you're going to be pandering and figuring out ways to maneuver to survive. We lie is a result of insecurities, as you said, as you write, lack of trust, and many other such factors. So the counterforce to that is finding trust, is finding people you can trust, finding things you can trust, and being true to them. If you really love somebody, if you really believe in something, would you lie to that cause or to that person? No. Because lying is part of that type of survival of the fittest, rat race mindset, where it's all about me and how do I maneuver, how do I figure it out, and what by all costs. Emes is when you realize it's not about you. There's a bigger picture, and are you dedicating yourself to it? And therefore, so what? So what? You did something wrong, acknowledge it, be accountable, and move on. When we start identifying ourselves by our successes and failures, we also become liars. When we identify ourselves as agents and ambassadors of God in this world, then our truth is living up to that. And if you make a mistake, you're accountable. So there's no quick answer to this in the sense, okay, tomorrow start telling the truth. Just do it step by step. Find areas in life that you really truthfully can commit to and live by that. Commit to it. Lead the way. Start a class, start something you believe in, and do it in a truthful way. Truth breeds truth. Bring the light of truth into your life, and slowly it'll dispel the darkness of lies and falsity and duplicity. So the way is through bringing in positive elements. And of course, if you find yourself in a situation where you are ready to lie, say to yourself, why? You may not have to always say the truth, but you don't have to lie. You can be quiet. Because it's easy to become a pathological liar, and it becomes something you just do. There's some people come to a point that they always lie first before they begin to thinking of the truth. And that's very sad. So it's really an assessment of our own selves and our lives. Okay. Let's go over to the question, the Chassidus question of the week. And we'll deal with the trust issues. There are more questions, and I'll deal with that in coming weeks. On Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, our year's destiny is written and sealed. Does that mean that our destiny is now sealed and it can't change? In putting it in different words, since our year's destiny is written and sealed on Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, is there any hope for changing our fate throughout the year? Do we believe in such fatalism? And if that is indeed the case, that our fate is sealed with no hope for change, what is the point of our daily prayers and service asking for blessings of good health and livelihood, etc.? I have learned in Chassidus the distinction between the sealed book of the high holidays and our prayers every day. But can you please explain it in palatable terms and apply it and show how it practically affects our daily lives? Okay. Yes, this is indeed a sugya shlema, an entire topic, both in Nigla and in Chassidus, with a famous question being asked, the stira, the contradiction between between the Gemara and Beitza, Daf Tezayin Omid Beis, where the Gemara says that, actually Tezayin Omid Aleph, 16a, Tezayin Omid Aleph, the Gemara says that Mezeinosef Shalodom, the food and the parnasa, which really means all the blessings and everything for Bonei Chayim Mezeina, is designated, Ktsuvim La'adam, are designated and defined, allocated to a person, Rosh Hashanah ad Yom Kippur, from Rosh Hashanah to Yom Kippur, the season we're coming from. And then in the same daf in Rosh Hashanah, Tezayin Omar Al, is the opinion of Rabbi Yesi that a person is judged every day for these matters. So this is a famous contradiction that the Bali Nigla talk about. the Turei, just to give you a few sources that talk about it, are the Turei Even, the Tzlach, Orech Lener, the Maral, Sfas Emes, and other places discuss this. And here you'll see how Chassidus adds a whole explanation of it that actually is not a doichik, because all those commentaries, they have to force it. And Chassidus brings a whole discussion, starting from the Alter Rebbe, and going through all the Rabbeim, quoting and adding their part to it, that addresses Sugi, and I'll try to sum it up with the sources themselves. It begins with a maimer that the Alter Rebbe said on Sunday, Parshas Noach, Tov Kuf Samachei, printed in Sefer HaMamorim, Tov Kuf Samachei, page, just to give you the page, Tov Reish Mem Ches, 648. That in turn is also brought as a maimer at the end of Parsha Kerach and Likutei Torah. I'll give sources, then I'll explain. As well as briefly in Kiseitze, in Likutei Torah, Kiseitze as well. Lamed Zayin Seif Amud Beis, 37b. In Kerach, as I said, V'hinei Porach Mata Ad, the last maimer in the Likutei Torah Kerach. And from there, it moves on to the Mittler Rebbe, who discusses it in number one in Ateres Reish, which is a sefer he wrote on Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, chapter 3, in the introduction to Derech Chaim, in Siddur on the pasuk Yem Liyem Yabiyu Emer, as well as in Pirush HaMishmilas of the Mittler Rebbe, chapter 26 and on. Then the Tzemach Tzedek speaks about it, the mitzvah Segalachas Mitzera, Segalachas Mitzera in Derech Mitzvosecha, briefly in Birchas Kenim as well. And then in Eira Teira A, which is a very fundamental maimer, on the pasuk Barechacha Hashem Elkecha B'chol Asher Tasa, the same pasuk as Tovkuf Samachei. It's an elaboration of that maimer, and that became the foundation, which I'll soon address, the Kuntur Samayin of the Rebbe Marashab. The Rebbe Marash in Vayigash Tov Reish Chav Zayin, and then the Kuntur Samayin that I just referred to, the end of chapter 17 and on, was probably the most elaboration, based on the Eira Teira I just mentioned. The page, I'll give you the page just in case you want to look it up. Tovshin Chav Beis, 322. Yeah. And then there's the Maimonim and Chanech Lanar as well. At the end, the Rebbe Rashab talks about it. And then there's the Vehine Porach Mat Arens from the Rebbe, Tovshin Lamed Gimel, which is Muge. There's Tovshin Mem Aleph, I believe. Tovshin Lamed Dalet as well, Tovshin Mem Aleph, and Tovshin Mem Hey. Okay, those are sources if you want to look it up. Now, briefly, there are several explanations given about it, but here's the Nakud, and it's a very geschmacke and very beautiful explanation that makes sense and puts the whole Tishrei and the whole year in context. The bottom line is this. On Tishrei, the entire hamshacha of a person's life is nimshach beruchnius in Atzilus, designating everything that will happen that year. Then what the story was, what about every day? Adam Nidin B'chol Yom. Why do we pray every day? So even though it's Das Rabbi Yesi, the Rabbanan also say we daven every day. And the Yiddish Gisir Rabbi Yesi, even though he says there's judgment every day, he doesn't negate the fact that there's also the judgment on Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. There's so many psukim that designate those days as those special days. So how do you explain? So the Chassidus brings from the Asara Mamoris, from the Rameh Mepana, the Mara Machad V'lei Pliga. There's no argument here. They're talking about different elements. The Rabbanon, or dealing about the Mishpat of Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, is about the Ksiva V'chsim Teva, for what? For what's designated, the Chesed that's designated to you in your life, in Bona Chaim Zein Revich. However, that remains a Ruchnisdik state, does not come down necessarily in Gashmis. It could remain Ruchnisdik. You could have that bracha can end up being a ruchnisdik, a pleasure in your life, an elam haba, or in some spiritual state. It also doesn't necessarily come down to details. Like he brings, it's not mitzuyar yet. It's a general chesed that's not yet shaped and defined. And as such, you need to have the tefillah of every day to bring it down by Gashmis, and it should come down in a tzir, a defined tzir. Like he brings there, you can have Bona Chaim Zeina Revicha, but how much is Boneh, how much Chaya, how much Mezene, that needs to be determined. He brings the story of the Baal Shem Tov, who once blessed people who wanted to have children, but they were wealthy. He says you can't have both. So he was able to, the power to change from children, instead of having wealth, they became poor, but they had children. So according to Rabbi Yossi, what happens is that chesed gets that shape and form. It's coming into beyond, to our world, through the everyday service. According to the Chachamim, the Rebbe Rashav explains is based on the Eira Teira, the Chachamim are talking primarily what happens Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. That Hamshach. And they will hold that there's already a shape and form to the blessings in Atzilus, because Atzilus also is the beginning of Chesed and so on. So what do you need the prayer every day is to reveal it, because it too may not come down entirely. So the real din begins Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. The Ascholas Adin is also for the details. However, you need to have, like he says, either Iyuna Ba'alma, which is a type of examination, or Pekida, which is a matter of inspection, that does need it every day in order to draw, because a person has to earn it. What happens if a person, God forbid, behaves in a way that does not allow them to earn the right that they were blessed with at Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur? So that's why every day has this particular focus. You can learn it inside those Maimorim, they elaborate it more. It's a brilliant explanation also to the whole idea of how things travel from the Ruchnis to Gashmis. So Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, if you don't have that, and that's why the Tzemach Tzedek says you must have that. That's why we have to have the awe of those days. And not just say, I'll pray for it the rest of the day, because that's when the whole package is delivered. Think of it like one of the examples he gives. The mind is the central nervous system. And it sends energy and it sends power to the rest of the body. But what happens if one of the Evarim, one of the organs, one of the limbs is somewhat compromised? So even though in Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur you have it, but you need to have it now into every particular organ. Or another example is given of Machshava and Dibur, and Maisa. The Rosh Hashanah Kippur is more like it was designated for you, these blessings, but it has to come down into action. So that's where you need to have both elements. In Kuntus Amayin, based on the Tzemach Tzedek, he says very clearly that the Imam is holding the same thing. The Chachamim are talking about Atzil as Ruchnius, how the Hamshach Ruchnius is, and that's on Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. And Rabbi Yossi is talking about Hamshach Gashmis, how it comes on the physical, and that's what happens every day. So you need both, because the first you need, that's where the original Hamshach comes from, Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, and you need every day in order either to give it shape and form, or to give it tangible material, or how much it should be ktsuvim, how much it should be measured to each one of us in our lives. So I hope I did some justice to this, but it's more elaborated upon in those Maimorim, and it gives us also a good take on Rosh Hashanah and the high holidays, and where we're going now, that they are like a head and the body. It's not just enough to keep the head healthy, the body has to also be healthy. So every limb has to be taken care of. Now we enter into the limbs of the year and the organs, and now we have to draw down, Fanander Pakan, as I said earlier, unpack the energy that was received. It was received, Ashana Teva Masukah, for each of us. But now you have to bring it into the details and bring it into a tangible and material form, and that's where the prayer for each day that we have, that, and both opinions hold up. You need both. The question is where the focus is and what the main emphasis is. And one more thing I'd add is that the Rebbe Rasha brings about the two opinions, whether Eris Mitziyarim, he says, was the Chesed of Atzilus have tzir or not. So Chatchili, you could think that he's talking that Rabbi Yossi is holding that there's no tzir, there's no shape and form in Chesed of Atzilus. That's why you need the tefillah b'chol and every day. And the Chacham hold there is a tzir. So the tefillah is just to bring it into Gashmis. But the truth is, when you read it closely there, you see that even in Rabbi Yossi, you could say both opinions, that there may be a tzir in Atzilus, but you still need the tzir to come into a tangible one and shape and form in Biyah. Just an additional footnote. Now we have the three essays. Let me do it quickly because of time limitations. The three essays, again, fine essays. First by Alice Kaplun, age 27, Machon Chana, Brooklyn. Soul-based relationships. And this is a beautiful short essay about the greatest struggle of our generation lies in our relationships. And she writes that until I became Torah observant, I really believed that the world was a threatening place. I felt that people were conniving and manipulative, and certainly not authentic. And she describes, of course, how this world runs on basically everybody just taking care of themselves by greed and their own preservation. But then she says, then I began exploring the world of Judaism because one day I heard a Holocaust survivor speak about the word neshama, the Jewish soul, and how every Jew has one within them. And started learning Chabad Chassidus, and she explains how chapter 32 in Tanya changed her whole life by explaining how that the ultimate goal is making the soul dominant over the body. So it's a very personal essay, very beautiful application in the sense of taking that concept of neshama's soul based on Lamed Beis and Tanya, and how that changed the perspective of a human being who lived in a selfish world and thought that's the only option we really have. So I definitely recommend this essay. You could find it on meaningfullife.com/MyLife/contest. And as we send out the weekly newsletter, subscribe to that, and we send updated essays every week as well. It's one essay. The next one is Being Present in the Goal-Oriented Moment by Akiva Lipkin, 20, Chevre Teira, Zal, Crown Heights. This is a very creative essay, very, very entertaining as well. Goal orientation, using the example of Nachshon ben Amnod of jumping into the sea, and writing it almost like a screenplay that is very, as I said, very personal and makes it very relevant about the idea of how the Jews broke down into the four groups and how Nachshon jumped in, and the lesson that in life about moving forward. So, hard for me to capture without you reading it yourself, but that's the second essay, which again, very well done. Very interesting, creative application. And finally, essay number 3 is a Hebrew, Harnessing the Power of the Mind by Hadassah Baruchman, age 59, Shlichus in Yerushalayim. Okay. And this is really a very nice analysis on the power of thought. Trag gut wird sein gut. Think good, it will be good. Bringing a whole bunch of examples. Chassidus Moach Shalat Alalev, the mind, the cognitive conditioning controlling the emotional. That a person where they think, that's where they are. When a person gets involved with someone that's despicable, they too become despicable. And a few other type of examples like that. And really describes with very practical examples how the mind literally can change your attitude. She gives one example that I'll just mention. One example of a person who was constantly speaking and never listening to anyone else's opinion. They're always speaking. And of course you get very frustrated and very irritated by it until she thought to herself, maybe this person is a very lonely person and never has an opportunity to communicate. So here they're using the opportunity. So your mind can change your attitude. And many more examples like this. So I definitely recommend this essay as well. The Koiche Shel Machshava. Again, all at meaningfullife.com/MyLife/contest. And this has been MyLife Chassidus Applied, episode 85. A good gebench to yar. Please send us your questions. And I want to dedicate the dedication of this was in memory of Kaylee Bas Moshe Zweig, born 26th of El, 1916, and 21st till the outside 21st of Shvat, 2008. That's Tofresh Samach Ches 5768. If you'd like to dedicate or submit a question, please do so at meaningfullife.com/MyLife. And this has been, as I said, MyLife Chassidus Applied, episode 85, every Sunday, 8 to 9 p.m. Again, a very good gebench to you to everyone.